Mike,
stand up there.
Mike's over there. Use it for sound.
Can everyone
section.
in the back hear me?
It's more for this.
Okay. Do you think the microphone's better for that?
I don't know. Never done this before.
All right, so I'll just speak with my voice. So, as you've heard, my name is Jason Vanderslice. I'm the front-end instructor with the Iron Yard. I teach primarily JavaScript and how to build client-side heavy web applications. And as we covered a little bit before, I have a crash course March 8th. We're going to be connecting to APIs in 2 hours to make a little IMDb movie app. So, with that aside, I'm here to talk about Heroku Pipelines. Is anyone here familiar with that? Okay, I've got one nodding head. The reason why I'm talking about this is for a lot of dev teams, so I'm not a DevOps role, but I do wear a lot of different hats. I have a couple startups on this side, aside from the Iron Yard, where process is a huge problem, and everyone wants a fence to throw like all of their problems over, and unfortunately, as I've seen on all of the teams I've been on, DevOps is the place where all of the bad things go, and I don't really understand why, because I think that the best way to have DevOps is integrated into the team. And I think that things like Heroku Pipelines, as I'm about to show you, kind of solidify that and streamline it from the get-go for developers and designers and stakeholders. So the problem that this alleviates is the time to review. Your development teams, they spend a lot of time not looking at code while still looking at code, as I'm sure you know. They have to pull down whatever the newest pull request is, look at that locally, take time away from whatever features they're developing, and when it comes down to things like server uptime or deployment or making sure that the keys are in the right files so that things will deploy, they can't think about that because they're spending so much time reviewing each other's code and trying to keep their quality up that they can't accomplish that. So what I view is a process that looks like this for most teams. It starts off with inception, so some sort of stakeholder brings in people that they trust and they decide like what the product's going to be. And then it moves into a design and plan stage, development stage, QA stage, and then eventually that feature is deployed, right? The problem with that is everyone thinks that there's like a fence that they can just be like, here's all this stuff and do it. But really, the best way to make this happen is to have DevOps as part of every stage. Because I truly believe having someone in a role that really truly understands how this deployment is happening, how all of these pieces are connected, anywhere from deliverables between the team to actually deploying the code, whether that's integration through GitHub or Travis or whatever, it really makes it the most streamlined process so that you can review your code faster. So when you hook up these pipelines inside of Heroku, it makes one really simple link. It puts this little deployed link underneath in the comments area of your current pull request so that anyone on a team or the person responsible for reviewing that code can just click that link and they're in a different environment. It's an instance of their current project that's separate from staging or production, that they can review that code live on a server. So you can identify issues like the keys weren't there to deploy the new service they integrated with, or it doesn't work right with those other things that you really truly can only see once it's deployed somewhere. So what it looks like from Heroku is you just have 3 stages. It's hard to see up there, but you have your review apps, which is on the left. The center one is your staging area, so when it's merged into whatever staging branch you have, and then your production, which typically is master. So that's what it looks like from both of the sides, and what I really feel like it accomplishes is developers can see instantly what code they're reviewing rather than just reviewing it analytically from the code, and the dev operations team isn't completely dependent on for something that the developers should see before they bring them into the problem. Because, like I said, these fences of throwing all of these problems over, whether it's designers, developers, DevOps, QA, and so forth, need to stop. And things like this kind of connect all of those pieces and make sure that they have concepts of each other so that these problems are just seen sooner. So what I want to do is kind of open this up to like any questions about or concerns about this process. So kind of taking the magical ether of DevOps and putting it a little bit into everyone's role. Does that kind of sit well with you? Because I feel like a lot of people in here are in DevOps roles. Like, I'm not seeing a lot of happy faces right now. Which is crazy because there's pizza and beer, so I think that at least at that level it's pretty happy. Okay, yeah.
There's some places where that would be an absolute disaster.
Why do you feel like that?
I can't imagine a rack space having everybody doing DevOps, just to be honest.
So yeah.
It's too massive an organization.
Yeah, so organizations with a lot of structure, it's really hard to start like sharing responsibilities and roles. What I'm really advocating for is kind of a little flavor of that. By using something as user-friendly as Heroku, it pulls that magical nature of like what's going to happen when we have all of this code deployed to a server away from the developers. And I think that anything to lower that barrier of entry, such as this, is better. It doesn't actually move the responsibilities to the developers and have that huge shakeup. It illustrates the problems quicker, which I feel like is the ultimate goal there. But yeah, I totally agree. You can't just have everyone be everyone's role. That is chaos. Thank you.
No, we have, I guess, the opposite problem. We're a small team for infrastructure. We keep the infrastructure running for the Security Operations Center. We also develop Python, Java, Bash, rules for our SIM, et cetera, et cetera.
So this isn't an option.
And I mean, the time to review is the thing our boss keeps telling us we need to do more of. The problem is, if we do more of that, then it's fewer Python scripts that get written. So trying to shorten that and still be able to check off a couple boxes so our boss can go and say, we're doing the right thing. We are reviewing new SIM rules. We are reviewing Python scripts before we try running them. And we're not putting our infrastructure at risk.
Yeah.
Is very appealing. Especially with a small team like that. I mean, half the time we go through in Git and we say, I've got a merge request.
Yes. Yeah.
Nobody's going to go answer it, so I end up going through, okay, then I'm going to improve my own
self-merge.
Uh-huh.
High five, yeah. That happens all the time. Because
what are the Python scripts?
Python scripts are
What are they
usually
for? In your world.
more analytics, so pulling data out of our data store, looking for beaconing, looking for long request URLs. A lot of the industry papers to find cyber threats. So our Python scripts, we pull those out. We have very specific scripts to do that. And then once we find evil or potential evil, we stick it back in again, stick it in front of an analyst and say, hey, what do you guys think? They'll say, well, you're getting a 20% false positive rate. Can you get rid of those? So we'll go back, we'll figure out how to refine the Python script. We'll do a new iteration of it, and we'll throw it out there within a couple hours.
So scripting inside of Elastic for your purpose, right?
Correct.
yeah, I'm not quite sure if you're against this or
Oh no, I'm for it as long as it's not an impediment to us getting. So from our perspective, the infrastructure team, our first responders, our analysts, are our customers. So if they ask for something and we tell them, well, it might be about 2 weeks because we're going to have to go through a peer review, we're going to have to put it on a staging environment.
Yes.
Well, how about I shorten that time frame down and I'll have it for you by the time you get back from lunch.
Yeah.
But I'm skipping 8 of the 10 valid processes that we should be doing with the code, the peer review, the check-in. The check-in might happen at the end of the week whenever I'm going and cleaning up my repository. I mean, we are...
I think, yeah. So something that typically I've come across, and people can identify this with this or not, is when you're in dev cycles and you're trying to churn out code, ship features, usually like have mornings, maybe afternoons, and probably not at the end of the day because you've been working on something for like 3 to 4 hours and you don't want to stop what you're doing to pull down somebody else's code. So I think what this really illustrates is a possible solution to just be able to click a link and be in an instance of that code without having to disrupt your local dev environment. And I think that although this is only like Node and Ruby as far as I know with Heroku, doesn't really solve the Python thing, it is a great process to model it after.
Exactly.
So I know that at my previous job, it was with this company called Articulate, where we were purely remote. So we had a lot of process problems, and there's a lot of processes that were built to make up for the fact that we were not in person with each other. this was like the holy grail of what we would love to have, but it was never possible because our dev operations teams were so bogged down with menial things like onboarding or all of these other things that they were trying so hard to automate, but they didn't get to make these like pipe dream things of pipelines, like really connecting in, okay, cool, staging and production, perfect. That solves a lot of problems, but it does nothing for the day-to-day. It does nothing for all those features that you want to see happen.
So, I mean, we're in the process right now. Right now, we test in prod.
Yeah.
We write the code in prod. We finally got the
You too like to live life dangerously, I see.
So we finally got to go ahead to, in the next couple, probably within mid Q2, to actually have a staging environment where I can go try the Python scripts out. I can prove that I'm not going to break something.
Yeah.
We use Elasticsearch for our data store, and if I go change a mapping, it might mean reindexing all of our data. At 4 terabytes a day, that is a 4 to 5 day turnaround. So every little change that I make from certain perspectives has big ramifications.
Absolutely.
So if I could go through and push a piece of Python code to staging, it's running against a sampling of our production events, and I know that, well, that bogs the server down. It needs some rework. Maybe it didn't go through a peer review, but at least now something similar to this, I'm going and I'm trying it out in a different environment.
I would love to continue this conversation because I think that it's something in your particular role you're faced with all the time. Like having that scale because of that running thing, keeping the lights on, keeping those things shipping, really trump a lot of ability to have this fluid process, to even interject it or spend the time on it. So I would love to talk about that because I truly believe it's this crazy balance, and you have to push the pin. In your case, you can't completely change it, right? Like a lot of teams can just be like, oh, we were agile yesterday, but this week we're going to do a waterfall. We're going to do it like old school now. But you don't have that luxury if your paycheck or your company is dependent on shipping that production code. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that more. But who in here has a staging environment for whatever they have out in production right now? Okay, like 3 out of...
Everybody except for me?
Yeah. No. I think that's an interesting point, though. I think that the way I went into wanting to talk to everyone about this was just assuming everyone had a staging and a production environment, continuous integration, maybe a good suite of tests, like all of those layers of things that aren't realistic for a lot of products that are already out there. I'm going to keep that in mind next time I talk about this. Anyone else have any pressing questions? Who here likes Heroku? Raise your hand if you like Heroku.
How do you leverage it? It's a part of Salesforce.
What?
How do you leverage it? It's a part of Salesforce.
It's a part of Salesforce.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I've never integrated with Salesforce, and honestly, have a lot of strong opinions about Salesforce in general. So yeah, I don't know.
They own Heroku as part of their app platform.
I think they bought Heroku
Yeah.
and then integrated it. Yeah.
So I've only ever used one Heroku app, and that is the Grok debugger in order to build Logstash config. That's the only Heroku app I'm familiar
Was it
with.
like the best experience ever? Every time I use Heroku, I'm like, this is awesome.
Well, for
I'm
me,
gonna do it
it's
again.
paste in a sample event, work on my regular expression, see what it spits out. Sometimes I'll put an event in that's a little bit too big, and Heroku all of a sudden says, I'm afraid I can't do that.
Heroku likes saying that. Pay more, then insert more coins. Well, I really appreciate everyone's time. I have like contact information here. But yeah, I really hammered the Iron Yard thing pretty hard. But thank you for letting me speak and take some of your time.
Jason.
Yeah. Is the other speaker here?